Workers in Hamilton, Ontario could soon be on strike. The city is the target of a series of rotating walkouts by postal workers designed to win concessions from the Crown Corporation. With more work disruptions on the way, what is the future of Canada Post in an increasingly digital world, and can the post office be saved? For his take, we're joined by Vincent Geloso. He's an economist at the Montreal Economic Institute. Vincent, great to have you back on the show.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Looking into this story today, a statistic really jumped out at me. The volume of mail Canada Post has been dealing with since 2006 has fallen by fully 17%. Is this strike just the kind of tip of the proverbial iceberg when it comes to this troubled Crown Corporation and what it needs to do to reinvent itself?
Yes, it's definitely part of the problem, but it goes back to way back than 2006. Actually, since 1996, Canada Post has faced a decline in mail volume per Canadian, which approximates 20%. So it's not a new phenomenon. It's part of the problem facing Canada Post. But another problem is it's facing very low productivity figure compared to private sector firms, and it's also having a lot of investment to make with regard to catching up technologically.
What do you think the impact is going to be, though, of this strike? Because if you read what people are saying on the blogs, I can't find anybody very sympathetic to Canada Post. Do you think potentially this is the nail in the coffin for the company in terms of its ability to maintain the status it has as a public company, as a company of the Crown?
Well, Andrea, you've raised the perfect point here. As a government monopoly, we can't do any more reform to Canada Post. We can make little tinkering left and right, but we can't get better results for consumers within the framework of a monopoly. And businesses and consumers are unsatisfied. The last strike in 1997 cost Canadian consumers $4 billion. Now the current strike, according to the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses, will cost $250 million per day. This is a huge cost to businesses, and this strikes us in contrast with Europe, where liberalization, meaning opening up the market to competition, where we've seen lower prices for mail items for both businesses and consumers.
Vincent, last time we had you on the show, we were talking about privatization, or at least the opening up of mail delivery in countries like Germany, Australia, the Netherlands. How were they able to do it so effectively, i.e. reduce cost of mail delivery, increase productivity, and it was mostly through layoffs that were the results of attrition in the workforce as opposed to a wholesale gutting of a crown jewel?
Well, you've raised the perfect point. First of all, when you introduce competition and private shareholders in company management, you actually introduce a new dynamic in the market which shifts the emphasis on sending cost to consumers to sending savings to consumer through higher productivity, to greater efficiency, and through higher profitability. And as you've raised out, it can be done without much pain, as we've seen in Germany, as we've seen in other countries. Because productivity increases, the company can actually keep increasing wages at the rate that productivity is going up. Postal workers can get more competition, and postal consumers get lower prices.
Okay, the union, of course, doesn't agree with that analysis, and basically what they're arguing is that this company has been profitable for the last 16 years, and basically Canada Post is being greedy and trying to make more money on the backs of its workers. What do you say, Vincent?
Well, I say that a government monopoly, any monopoly for that matter, would be hard put not to make a profit. I mean, you don't have any competition. You're immortal. You're immune to market pressures. So if you're unable to produce a profit when you're not facing any competition, that would be sad. Now, the fact that Canada Post has profits of this amplitude, it's profit that are made on the back of consumers through higher prices, lower quality, and actually less satisfaction for consumers. And we've seen in countries in Europe, Germany, Austria, the Netherlands, even New Zealand in the other end of the world.
Another reason people say that we have to keep Canada Post as a Crown corporation has to do with, you know, rural mail delivery, remote communities. I mean, we are a large country. Could a semi-privatized or a fully privatized Canada Post service our complicated geography in this country, or are you going to suddenly have winners and losers where the folks in the cities really benefit from a privatized operator, but everyone else is kind of out of luck?
Well, there's three elements to that question. First and foremost, let's remember that the vast majority of Canadians live along the U.S. border, and the vast majority live in cities, not in northern regions or further regions like Saguenay in Quebec or Timmins in Ontario. But this being the fact, we should ask ourselves, if our goal is really to get them mail, is it best to prohibit competition for the vast majority of Canadian consumers rather than directly compensate those affected? There exists a lot of fiscal ways through tax deduction that could be made more generous to compensate people in Yellowknife, people in Whitehorse, people in Nicollet, people in a lot of cities in the north. That could be a way of doing ways much more cheaper and having the vast majority of Canadians benefit from competition and lower prices, and having different services at different prices to suit their needs.
Vincent, what's your prediction here? We just talked about the throne speech. There was nothing in there about Canada Post, but in the previous sitting of government, there had been efforts to push through some reform, open up international mail, for example. What do you see happening in the future for Canada Post? What kind of potential reforms could we possibly envision?
Well, a first step for a good reform for the government would be to follow the advisory panel that it commissioned in 2007 to go forward with a privatization plan for employees, which would mean giving shares to the employee of Canada Post, hence making that every increase in productivity would be made to the benefit of workers because they would gain higher dividends, and then that as a first step would increase the quality at the service at Canada Post. But then in the long run, opening up the market to competition, and in the longer run, even sell remaining assets within Canada Post to private investors. That could be a good plan. And personally, I wish that any government, any party will support this idea. It would help Canadian consumers, would help Canadian businesses, and it wouldn't put Canadian consumers and businesses hostage of a government monopoly which provides a one-size-fits-all service.
Well, Vincent Geloso with the Montreal Economic Institute, we're going to have to leave it there, but thanks again for coming on the show.
It was a pleasure.